expecting two more panelists. They probably are about to arrive, but maybe we can just get started, right? And they will just join. Okay, so without further ado, we want to really take advantage of this panel to make an analysis, a radiography of legal tech entrepreneurship in Spain, but not just in Spain in a broader context, right? So allow me to use a couple of examples as my starting points. We know that entrepreneurship in Spain is really, and technology-based entrepreneurship is growing very quickly in recent years, but we also know that legal tech startups are not growing so quickly, and we understand that there are many barriers for that. But if we look abroad to some specific jurisdictions, which are very different to Spain, no doubt about that. For instance, Israel or Singapore. What do we find? We find Israel that is called itself and is known to be a startup nation. And I was just there last week, and what I've seen is that legal tech is just exploding in Israel, but with some very specific characteristics. Legal tech startups born in Israel are not serving the Israel market, they are mainly serving the USA markets, because the Israeli market is very small. Now, this is interesting, I think, because Israel has taken as a nationwide policy at the highest priority to promote entrepreneurship at many levels, of course, the startup nation, but especially in the legal industry. They want to be leaders globally, and they prepare their startups to be global leaders. Now, why can they do that? For one, because, as you know, Israel invests around 6% of its GDP into technological developments for defense, for military defense. And a lot of the developments are then used for civil purposes. Second of all, military service is compulsory, with some very few exceptions, for every single male in Israel, meaning that for 3 years, many people get training in technology, in highly sophisticated technological solutions for the military that then can be put to civil services. And they have the technology, they have the support from the states, and they look abroad. Why do they look abroad and not domestically? It is my understanding that there are some reasons that have to do with the particular geography of Israel. To start with, it's a very small market, 8 million people scattered in the middle of a highly deserted area with just 2 big cities, and very few firms that can really become clients of those startups. And also, they cannot really trade with the neighbors. There's no trade in the regions, so they need to trade with other jurisdictions, other countries, and especially with the USA. There is a privileged relationship. So you have a number of reasons, I would say, that lead Israel to be a startup nation, also in legal tech. And Singapore has made one of the key strategies of its government to become a leading global hub for the practice of legal services. If you know, the Singapore Law Academy, through the FLIP program, is offering almost free training to all the lawyers in the region so that they can have the cutting-edge technologies to be competing at an advantage against other law firms. And they are really doing that with a publicly oriented, publicly funded strategy. So, by way of context, these are 2 examples we can look at. And now, knowing that Spain is very differently, my first question is, how do you see the ecosystem for entrepreneurship, and particularly for legal tech and entrepreneurship in Spain? Do you feel legal tech is growing up to its potential, is finding many barriers? What are your views? And I want this to be an open conversation, so I'm not going to follow any particular order. Who wants to comment first?
So I think that's the moment for the entrepreneurship here in Spain, because we are in the incubators stage. Any entrepreneurship will stay in the moment at all the law firms are looking for talent, are looking for new ways doing things. So things are changing in the legal sector, and this is the way that entrepreneurships look for new opportunities in our sector. So I think this is the moment for the entrepreneurs to be alert and to be with all the knowledge prepared to develop new tools and new technologies for the law firms industry.
Do you have any other views? Or, yeah.
And I think, Javier, do you hear me? Yeah. I think, Javier, this is also a question of state policy and country strategy. So first, I mean, before talking about legal tech, the reality is that, well, my perception is that we are not implementing the structural reforms or the virtuous structural approach that other countries are doing. And in my perspective, we are late. We are quite late. And that is going to affect us significantly. I think if we don't resolve this as a country in 10, 15 years, we're going to have serious issues that are bottom line issues for the country. And if we move that to legal tech and how to do entrepreneurship and how to innovate in legal tech, what I see is it's a mixed approach, but I don't see yet that structural approach also in legal tech. I see that some firms or companies are considering this kind of, well, this is interesting. It would be good to raise and to publish some brochures with nice digital buzzwords and innovation, entrepreneurship, we support, blah, blah, blah. But I don't see a core structural approach that is really transforming the operating model of the firms or the legal departments. And I think this is also a challenge because, or it's difficult because in most of the cases, their customers, which is the internal customer or a multinational, they are themselves suffering in doing this transformation. So if in legal tech and in the legal function, we don't take the speed to innovate at the same level and with the same blood that they are living in the plate, I think we're gonna suffer. So we need to speed up. And some of the initiatives that you're taking forward, we can talk about later, I think are very ideal for it.
Yeah. Can I say something? Yeah. Perhaps from the outside, you know, I'm from Mexico, but I've been taking part for the past 10 years in working technology with a publisher, a Spanish publisher in law, Tirando Blanc, and they have developed progressively around every 3 years from public funding, different technologies for them. So my impression is that while the funding is there to develop and to do research, the idea of entering into that project is not itself part of the legal mindset of law firms. I mean, if a publisher can do that and obtain public funding, then perhaps large law firms can do that all the same. And not because a publisher is more equipped in terms of technology, because it's a very small development team that they have in-house. I would wonder to say that legal law firms, large law firms in Spain, do have a larger in-house tech department to do that. But it's about the mindset, not so much about the ecosystem that doesn't have the resources. That said, there's not a public policy like there is in Israel and Singapore. That's it, right? But I think it's not a matter of the availability of the funding, but of the mindset of legal in-house lawyers and law firms at large, from an external point of view, right?
Okay, so following up on that, and of course you feel free to comment on the previous question, but what is your view then, you know, having mapped the field and seen what exists, but also the barriers to scale, what are the best opportunities you can find now in the market for technology to improve the actual delivery of legal services, spaces in which new innovative legal tech startups could actually find a way to scale quickly? Do you see that? Do you see those spaces, and which ones are those in your view? Yeah.
Well, I'm Javier. Sorry I got late. I'm sorry. Javier Pascual from CISA. Thank you, Javier, for the presentation and the summit. Just one point regarding the first question. I think it's not a problem of the ecosystem, like administration or public policies, but what you've said, that the legal actors, the legal stakeholders, mainly lawyers, they don't want, I think, in my opinion, and I'm watching this with our tool. We have a tool that digitalizes the societies to vote and legal stakeholders meetings and etc. And the problem is that they don't want a tool that is going to do what they do. Okay, right. So the main problem is to find a legal firm that wants to start using a tool that probably is going to make that they have to fire people. You know, I think that's the main problem. Or the existence of a pure automatized IA tool that makes 100% the job of a lawyer, that this doesn't exist. Okay?
Yeah.
So the problem is that lawyers want to go, what we say in Spanish, in the top of the whale of the legal tech. No? And regarding the second question, I think it's basically an area where it's easy for lawyers to start using this technology, not passing from white to black. For example, our tool, and I don't want to sell anything here, it's easy for lawyers. Like the tool is made for lawyers, to make easier their job. But from white to black, give them a tool that it's totally new, someone that it's been 40 years doing the same process,
Right.
it's impossible.
Yes.
Perhaps at the same time, a topic that is rarely treated in terms of legal tech entrepreneurship is how can we not only better market the product, but create the training for lawyers to consume that product. Sometimes even if you have a very good user experience interface, a very well-designed interface, that doesn't do it. In order to fill the gap of the transition between a traditional workload of a lawyer into a technological workload, you need to retrain, to upskill the lawyer in terms of not merely knowing the tool, but incorporating it in a more efficient way in every day. So we need to start talking about how can we better also train along with marketing and merchandising our products in terms of legal tech.
Any other comment on this point? Because we are seeing a landscape that doesn't seem to be very promising yet for the explosion of, let's say, investments into legal tech. So I know, and perhaps is one specific way in which the legal industry in Spain is trying to nurture early stage innovation in this field, is by having law firms creating spaces, for instance, where they can explore with some startups, integrate them into the culture of the firm and try to work towards the change of that culture and the training. First of all, can you elaborate a little bit more on that particular strategy to promote early stage innovation? What are the limits of that? And are there any other approaches that you see here or abroad that could be more effective in terms of transforming at a scale legal industry?
In my opinion, we have experience watching this kind of hubs in law firms and all that, this stuff. But in these situations, we see that the solutions that they want to set up, they are more or more specialized to this firm. We are seeing lawyers in big law firms as we done like 2 years ago, and they know the sector, they know the specialization like commercial law, and they know how it works, and then they know how to improve it using technology. So I think the most useful tool for improving this area is the lawyers that know how to work in this sector. They need to start feeling confident in using technology because they are going to automatize procedures and they are going to be more efficient. I think that's the point.
And I think that anything that sponsor entrepreneurship, intra-firm, and so on is very positive. So that is good, no? Also, where I see some firms struggling, it is in identifying the specific use cases that could deliver a right solution that at the end can be monetized and can be structurally integrated into the pipeline of the firm, no? And in that angle, something that could be interesting to explore it is to educate and form the senior people of these firms, because normally they are the key decision makers and not the staff, to really have a bath of technology, but that's completely necessary. I mean, maybe, and this is what I have experienced in the past, is that in some cases the senior partners, they are kind of saying, well, it's 5 years to retirement, so I don't want to enter into this. And then the firm gets slower, slow down. And what it would be interesting is maybe the second top management layer, or almost the ones that still can, just risk budget and take decisions, educate them in artificial intelligence, big data, natural language processing, so they are able to understand that machine learning is not the same. It's not just artificial intelligence; it's a segment of it, and then deep learning is a different thing, and so on. Because if they are experts in their field, but they are also able to understand these key dynamics in the market, they are better formed to take those decisions and risk.
How far are we from there, in your view?
I think we still have way to go, and we should go much faster.
Yeah, Javier, in the legal area, in my humble experience, the MVP, for example, you want to create a cup of tea, really cool, whatever. You can start with an MVP that you can fill it with tea, and you can drink, and that's an MVP. Yeah. But in the legal area, the MVP has to be perfect.
Right.
I mean, there's no chance for any mistake. If a lawyer sees any mistake, we need perfection. I mean, we are lawyers, okay? And that's a very big problem. I mean, at the beginning, with this tool, I mean, this is our experience, no? One of our partners, he was like a really commercial, no? He came from the from marketing area and start selling with the MVP, show whatever, and zero clients, no? minus 10.
Do you agree with this view? You had some...
It's a question of educating the customer and setting the expectations at the right level also.
In our experience in higher levels, that's perfect because we are celebrating or hosting some kind of events like the Innovation Tech Hub in Munich that entrepreneurs face the reality of the law firms. So they detect the really needs that the lawyers are demanding on the law firm industry. So sometimes it's not only the problem from the law firms, sometimes it's the problem for the entrepreneurs, and our recommendation is all the time we receive some package very close that is the product finalized. This kind of hackathons and events on legal tech help the entrepreneur to know in the first person about the really needs about the law firm. So I think this is a very useful issue because in this kind of MVP product or agile or innovation lean startup that we are moving, this is a way that lawyers and entrepreneurs has to move together and move forward.
Okay, so and related to that, I have a question I cannot resist to make because you are talking about and you were talking, Jorge, and you were, I think, agreeing with that, the cultural barrier that we are facing, right? You're saying it's important to train seniors. I doubt myself, I'm not the moderator, but I doubt to what extent it is possible to train very senior lawyers in big law firms because it is difficult. They already have their career built and so on and so forth. You might have to wait for the next generations, and especially what is critical is that the new leaders, the new generations joining those law firms are really well versed into the specific advantages that technology has for the practice of the law, right? So that leads me to the question of the role that you think law schools have in facilitating this conversation between the lawyers, the more senior ones, the entrepreneurs, the future generations and the existing generations at the top of the law firms. What do you think law schools should be doing? What do you think they are doing in fact? And you can be here quite candid in that. Let me start with Jorge because he's the dean of a law school, so probably he can talk from direct experience. Jorge, what?
There's one obvious role, which is to create within the curricula this DNA of legal tech. That is to insert within the DNA of the law school's curricula the idea that the law services can be embedded in legal lawyering with technology flavor. That's one of the things that's quite obvious. But I think that the second and third thing that are not that obvious is that You mentioned new schemes to bring about technology and innovation to law firms. And I think you were thinking about the forms, the forming model where law firms can bring to the law school a legal problem that can be translated into a technological solution, so it can be quasi-mature within the law schools at the clinical level. That is to have, at the law schools, the idea of students partaking into real-life problems, like you said, in the flesh, so they can see how technology can be paired with the legal services within the law school. And I think the third role would be to provide, let me put it this way, a consumer's guide, a consumer report of legal tech for the legal services market. That is, you have pointed out that you need to, it is not realistic perhaps to re-educate the partners so they can take the leadership. Okay, but what about law schools? What about law schools providing information, disseminating information about what is the state of the art in terms of legal tech? And to do that as part of the executive education or as part of the everyday communication with the legal services market. This is something that law schools rarely face, but I think they should be doing this. That is to provide them with an educated guess to the law firms as to where to point out to better solutions.
What is your view about this? Do you think law schools should be playing that role? Do you think they are playing it? Do they have the capacity to play it? You all are more or less engaged into teaching in university.
You're in IE, you are doing a big effort on that because we are assisting to the Law Ahead Hub that you are celebrating every month. So I think this is the role of the law business school, to create spaces where really needs and entrepreneurs can join together and establish collaboration between the law firms and the projects. So I think this is the way to move forward, because hackathons, events, legal techs, your initiative, that's moving and proposing some common spaces where all together we can face different problems.
Actually, here we have an example of this, because we all three came from the EI, from the first masters specialized in legal tech. And when we were like 6 months in our internship, we decided to set up a company. And now we are like half a year working on that. We are very small yet, but we think we are watching that everyone in the sector, they are they want to see what we're doing, because we are innovating. We want to go to a new step, a new law. Now it's called like this, new law or legal tech, and we are improving the legal sector, I think. Because
but wouldn't you say that new vision that this master provided would it be provided at the LLB level, at the bachelor's level? Wouldn't you say that we could go a step further and to insert that vision at the student and the undergraduate students level, for them to realize that technology can and should work par-to-par with legal services, and to have this innovation DNA within their vision of the legal services? Wouldn't you say that that's possible?
yeah, it is, of course.
I think that's precisely the problem, at least in Spain. I mean, I finished university some years ago, but my little brother is still in the same university. I'm not going to say the name, no? But I mean, zero subjects in nothing related with legal tech or innovation. And I think that the reason is that universities, mainly public universities, the people that work there, no, they've been a lot of years. They have to make an exam. There's a hierarchy, no, a hierarchy. So I think it's more complicated to start changing, like suddenly the itinerary of subjects in LLMs or in masters is much more agile. And if you are one of, it's the truth, no, like one of the first or the second master in law in IE, of course, probably it's going to be the best. And the proof is that we've done it, and 6 months later we created this firm that for the moment it's fine. No? And then another step, I mean, university, master, LLM, and then when you are working, no, in the firms. So maybe they should, in universities and in the firms, start like making a studental labor there. No?
So this question is for everyone, but especially for you. When you look at your markets, potential markets, do you look just to Spain, or do you think some of the products you have in mind, or other startups in Spain have in mind, could be optimized so that from the beginning they can serve in other jurisdictions, maybe in Latin America, for instance? What is your market? I was talking about Israel, focusing abroad. What is your market? And what do you think is the market of legal tech startups in Spain? Can they, reasonably speaking, think bigger than Spain or not? What is going on in that field?
Yeah, I think when we started, we didn't have any customer from abroad. But now we are seeing that, for example, companies from Asia, they are coming here just in order to create, because in Spain, I think the fintech sector is getting bigger, and we can see it in the startups that they are in the South Summit. And we've seen that we can give our services, but specialize in the legal Spanish sector. We cannot give another, because we are lawyers and we only have this jurisdiction, and we are specialized only in the Spanish sector. But we are watching that many companies from abroad, they want to come to Spain because they consider Spain as a safe country in order to set up a fintech company, or for example, another example is the GDPR, the new regulation. We see that companies from all abroad, they want to have the European regulation because it's safer than other regulations. So in this sense, we are having like customers from abroad.
But can I just add something? Yes. It is interesting to notice that in the past panel, I think it was the CEO from Legal Army, said that she spent around 3 years surveying different technologies and found or arrived at the conclusion that they had to produce their own technology, to do an in-house development, mainly because of the language barrier. So I think this signals a great opportunity for innovators in Spain to become a beacon of innovation for Latin America, for example, right? I mean, for every which jurisdiction, which Spanish is the official language to work with. Because of what Legal Army said, right? That the other alternative is quite costly, which is to self-develop the tool. But if you have an ecosystem of legal tech entrepreneurship in Spanish, that could be an exportable product all the way.
And there's something, Jorge, that you were pointing out before, which is the mindset change. We need to support ourselves. I see sometimes in the market, and when we consider all these tools and how to approach this, the strategy, that when some people see a kind of American or Anglo-Saxon solution, the starting point, it is a little bit higher than kind of a local solution and so on. We need to trust in ourselves. We need to trust in our people. We need to back ourselves. I always say, I explained the example, I lived in Switzerland for a few years. I was always traveling, but I had the opportunity to work with many clients there in Switzerland. Interestingly, 85–90% of the coffee machines that they had in every company, it was a local trademark that is very known and famous. And they loved the Italian coffee and the Italians for everything. But they were saying, equal conditions, we buy the Swiss machine. And that helps the company, and then they can start a scale and so on. So first, we need to change that culture, that mindset, and that comes from above. And later, part of the risk of enabling a very kind of American-oriented approach, it is that, or Anglo-Saxon or foreign, it is that digital solutions that could be scaled, and those are the ones interested in for any firm and so on, are going to become vertical solutions. And when they work and finally they clinch and they are adopted and there's the curve of escalation, if we are not, as a country or as our countries, if we are not leading those verticals, others from abroad will come and take that vertical And that's an issue because our teams and our people would have less capacity to innovate and do entrepreneurship there. So that's, I think we need to also consider that. We need to change that mindset. It is very, very important.
Daniel, I want to ask you specifically because you also have this European-wide approach, and if we focus just on Europe, you can compare the evolution of legal tech across different countries or member states of the European Union, if you want. You know, what would you say are the best countries, if we can talk in those terms, in terms of promoting legal tech, or at least in terms of eliminating the barriers for these early stage startups to test themselves? Who do we need to look at? Is it the UK, is it Germany, is it the Netherlands, and why?
In my experience, is Germany, of course, because they are promoting this kind of common spaces that are the key for the encounter between talent, knowledge, and real needs. Of course, I completely agree with Ignacio that we have to believe in ourselves, in our Spain way of doing things, and on the resolutive skills that we have face the other nationalities in Europe. But we have some kind of resolutive things in this kind of minimum viable product, agile, innovative learning that is in our Spanish core. So we have to take advantage of these ability skills to promote and to create. Obviously, the barriers of financials, ecosystems, low schools are helping on that issue. But from my experience, Germany is doing things quite well.
Is that so? I think it's interesting to explore that a little bit more. Is that, you know, if I think in Germany, it's not that I see enormous differences in respect to other advanced European states, other than probably the size of the markets. You know, you have German for 80 million people, a huge market, very wealthy, very internationally oriented, of course, and that probably gives more opportunities for to scale. But I'm just wondering, because the Netherlands...
Of course, this is one of the reasons, but another is that they believe in the results that they obtain from young entrepreneurships that came to the law firms, to this hackathon or this event. So, of course, we have to give the opportunity, but we have to transform this kind of opportunities in real products to incorporate in our firms.
Any one of you perhaps has views about Switzerland or any other member state? What do you think? Is it the size? Is it the ecosystem? And if so, why is the ecosystem more advanced?
Switzerland that's a good question, Javier, because Switzerland is like Israel, 8 million people, 25 experts, but the DNA of innovation is very, very inside and from the school, from schooling when they are 8 and 9 years old. And then they grow with it, and that's, I think, the same now in Israel. That changed tremendously. In Germany, I think it's the same. You're right, but still, I see many things, interesting articles from German initiatives that are very innovative and so on. But they are still in German, and they haven't translated them to English or taken the effort in doing that. So they can sometimes they are kind of they have the innovation culture also from the automotive and so on. And that's still an opportunity. When we control the language of the regulation, we can still innovate. If not, what I see in other markets that is interesting is, for instance, in the UK, is there is a cross-pollination between the developments in AI or startups in other segments, medical, healthcare, blockchain, and so on, and then they are exported into legal tech, and then they go a little bit faster. That we don't have that, unfortunately, yet here, and that's an issue because of the cannibalization of the future verticals. And for instance, if we don't do that, I know there's a European unicorn that is working in RPA and robotics process automation. It's one of the few European companies, but they're very good in what they do. So they maybe are not focusing in legal tech yet, but in the moment that they, I mean, this is the risk for some, I mean, for the profession, that if we don't take the ownership of our data, our skills, and others will do it. And I think that's your organization and initiatives like the lab and the hub, where all these disciplines spend quality time together. I think that's the key, quality time together. Every time that I've been able to take to the market something interesting as a product in a multinational advisory firm and so on, it has been when different verticals were working together, but not from time to time, consistently. And that's difficult. That is not happening as often as it should.
Yeah, I have the same experience in running these global legal tech venture days, of seeing how how what we can call legal exceptionalism or legal tech exceptionalism is not really such. There are many corporations that have not, that are developing solutions for other verticals that could be adapted with an additional layer for the legal sector. If they are not doing it yet, it's because they don't see the possibility to scale. They see too much, a very reactive approach, a lot of fragmentation. There is not just enough reasons to invest at the scale. Sure. But exactly. But that exceptionalism maybe is one reason that explains the slowness to uptake or to promote entrepreneurship. Somehow the legal industry feels a little bit insulated from others, right? Do you see that? Do you agree with that?
We've seen basically that in our experience. In fact, last week or a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting with a guy from Ecuador, an ex-student of the master, one of the good things about the master, that you can meet people from all parts of the world. And he wanted to start commercializing this tool in Ecuador. No? But he said that the regulation was different. Okay? And this kind of area, like board meetings and shareholders meeting, it's really ABC. I mean, you call a meeting, you vote, you write the certificate, the minutes, yeah, and that's it. But, for example, in Ecuador, he said that it's obligatory to record the meetings, and we didn't have this tool for every meeting. That's one thing that changes from one regulation to another one. Then all the documentation has to be different. And I mean, this was a 30 minutes meeting. Probably if we went there, we could realize that we would need 6 months of new development. Yeah. So each country, Europe maybe is more similar, but no, each country is different.
I want to ask you, I think as I see that we are coming towards the end, and perhaps there's some question from the audience at the end. I want to ask you to provide sharp and short recommendations for legal tech startups that, given these circumstances, want still to give it a try, to raise capital, to develop their products. What areas do you really think are more promising and face less barriers? If you can each name one or two where you really think this is the next step in terms of attracting clients and attracting investments. Ignacio.
For me, clearly the number one, and I evangelize many on it, it is data rights. If you ask me one, data rights. I have 3 or 4 more, but yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, the point is, in the way innovation happens nowadays, you could have the best hardware, you could have the best software or algorithm, but if you don't have the right data to feed that process in the right moment and with the right rights, what I call the kind of green data, which is a data that nobody can question and so on, and know that data is something dynamic that is always changing, and it can be moved in 1 second from one side of the world to the other. So you need to acquire or create the data, you need to protect it, you need to govern it, and then most likely you're going to start to use it as, you're going to share it with other companies, sometimes in exchange of data and so on. So developing a strategy for data rights, what do you need to do as a company? And the legal sector has to help very much there, because it's an intangible assets is air. So we need to frame it with rights and law. That's the only way we can do it. So we need to participate there. And the other point about that, it is if we are going to start to exchange data from one industry, one segment to the others to launch value propositions to the markets between big multinationals, startups, and so on, the value of data, there's interesting opportunities for a legal plus economic kind of approach to do a data valuation on a real, on a time form, and kind of, there's interesting elements there.
Anyone? What would you recommend?
Maybe, I mean, corporate law for sure. I mean, maybe corporate law, that is our tool is focusing that, but not just because everything is paper, no? Because, for example, in the tribunals, you can see that paper is everywhere, no? So it's not the only area. But because the European Union is putting the focus in this area, then digitalizing the corporate law. For example, there's a new directive from May just for this, for the digitalization of corporate law. So that's good because it's not just for Spain, but for whole Europe.
For me, it's very important to focus on UX, no? And what we talk every day is about LX, lawyer experience, is a very different user about software, and deep learning is for me the next step about legal tech. In order to take a lot of documents, to analyze them and have results, is very, very important in all areas of law, deep learning.
A recommendation for entrepreneurs, we are in the place, is a tool that improves the communication between the lawyer and the client. So this is a big challenge. In Holland, we are working in that initiative in the way that we approach the digital learning, the way that people approach to video skill bars, to micro-learning, to information at the moment of need, this kind of initiatives. That is a huge range to develop new tools and to improve the way that the lawyer approach to the client, and the client, of course, communicate their needs to the firm, to the lawyer.
Yeah.
I would say migrating interfaces. That is, to develop interfaces to migrate the traditional way the lawyers work into a digital environment. From contracts, clouds, computing, to automating due diligence. That is to think of the interfaces that will offer digital services, doing it in a traditional way.
Okay. Well,
and of course, smart contracts is a very nice way for lawyers to start to think as a programmer. That's a very good thing also.
well, we're just out of time, so thank you so much for sticking to the time and for an interesting conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.